You're watching Captains of Industry. Mohammed Akoojee, CEO of Imperial, Africa's largest logistics company, and now Chief Operating Officer of DP World's logistics pillar, has been dealing from a very early age indeed. In 3 years at Investec Corporate Finance, he was involved in the whole pipeline. From origination to negotiation and deal closure, he played it all. At Imperial, he became the ultimate deal maker, leading the company's mergers and acquisition strategy on the continent, and eventually became the chief financial officer when he was instrumental in the unbundling of motors. Imperial was eventually acquired by DP World. He is our Captains of Industry leader today. Mohammed, was deal making always the target when you were growing up?
Yeah, so trading is in our blood, through the family and through the family businesses, etc. And yeah, I think when I entered the industry as a young chartered accountant, I was always keen to get involved in banking. It is an industry that I believe that you get into and you learn a lot. And investment banking was something I always wanted to do and experience because of the amount you can learn out of that. So yeah, I think there's an element of trading in there, an element of opportunism, which is required in deal making. But yeah, I did have very good leaders that I worked for over the years that taught me many things about deal making.
Yeah.
And I used all of that sort of advantage to apply to the business.
Yeah, I wanted to know if you could share some of them. Actually, do they include a certain Mr. Lynch?
Unfortunately, I didn't work for Mr. Lynch, but I joined just after Mr. Lynch passed on. But obviously, I was in the banking industry at the time, and I worked on a few transactions that involved Imperial before I joined them as an M&A executive.
Yeah, and the accounting side of it. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you. The accounting side of it, I just wanted to know where that started off. Was that you fulfilling your father's dreams, or was that you doing what Mohammed wanted to do?
No, so my parents wanted me to be a medical doctor, and my results were not good enough to get into medical school, so I had to choose another path. And accountancy and numbers was something that I was fond of, and I went for it. And yeah, that's how I got involved in becoming an accountant.
Yeah. I mean, you took responsibility at a very young age, because I'm looking here where you served on the exco of Imperial Holdings at 32. And you then moved on to the holding companies level to become a board member at the age of 33. I just wanted to know, in terms of that career advancement, whether this was something that took you by surprise, and what advice you would give young people who potentially could be looking at an industry such as yours and thinking, perhaps I would like to become a Mohammed.
Yeah, look, I was very fortunate that the leaders I worked for gave me the opportunity. And when people give you an opportunity, you got to grab it and take advantage of it. And yeah, my career, as I said, I never ever underestimate the impact people have had on it.
Sure.
So my advice to young people is that when there's opportunity, take it and grab it, and don't only look at the financial opportunity in advancing your career. Sometimes you have to take one step back to take 2 steps forward, and I did that in my career. So when I was tired of M&A, because I was tired at some point in that career, that happened in 2015, I decided to go into the operations and run a business.
Sure.
And that meant me having to step off the board and going into operations. And if I didn't do that at that time and consciously make the decision to get out of deal making and expand my capability in a new area, I wouldn't have been where I am today.
Yeah.
So you got to sometimes do that in your career. And although it looks like you're going one step back, you actually are taking two steps forward because you're adding to your capability. And the next opportunity that comes up, you're better placed.
Yeah.
And I
And
would encourage youngsters to try new things. If you look at my career, I've never done the same thing for very long periods of time. And that gives you an ability to learn a lot, and it gives you an ability to get competency and experience so that you can do a lot more complex jobs as they come up at a young age.
yeah.
So yeah, you must at a young age try different things and do different things. Don't get stuck in one job.
In your new role, and I really wanted to get to the bottom of that, of what that entails as a Chief Operating Officer of DP World, while at the same time being CEO of Imperial.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Yeah, the role really entails um, taking our capabilities in logistics and expanding it into new markets, cross-selling our capabilities to existing clients in other geographies and to new geographies. Imperial was acquired by DP World, and a few other logistics acquisitions have been done over the last 12 to 24 months. DP World have got a strategy to expand their business to other areas of the supply chain. And prior to the acquisitions, was largely a ports and terminals business. And with the acquisitions come new capabilities, new clients, customers, and great people. And my main focus is going to be to take the capabilities and leverage that into new markets and create a global end-to-end supply chain logistics player, enabling trade flow across multiple markets.
Yeah, I want to talk about that logistics pillar. As you say, this is a global role. And what does it entail, and how does that fit into your running of Imperial on the African continent?
Yeah, so Imperial is largely an African and European focused business from a geography point of view.
Right.
And we have got capabilities in the supply chain, and we've got clients that we can expand with into new markets. So from a global perspective, DP World and I would like to leverage that and use the platforms we have currently in Africa into new markets. But then Africa needs to be connected, right, to other parts of the world. And as Imperial, prior to this transaction, our strategy was to be gateway to Africa. But with DP World's global port network and logistics network, we can now expand our offering to our clients in the African continent to be really end to end and take product from source markets into Africa and then do the inland distribution market access activities that we do.
Yeah.
So I think there's a positive in that for Imperial as well as for DP World, and that was one of the main strategic rationales for the transaction.
Yeah. And at the moment, how connected is Africa to Dubai? Because as you say, this was one of the main reasons that DP World decided to take a look at Imperial and eventually executed the deal.
Yeah, look, I think from a logistics point of view, it is not as well connected as it should be. We've got a very good port network now with DP World. We've got a port network in about 8 countries across Africa, in North Africa, West Africa, and West and East Africa. So, one of our main focuses is how we can use that port infrastructure and connect that into trade flows that come out of the UAE. Imperial will play an important role in that from an inland transportation, logistics, supply chain, warehousing, distribution perspective. We recently started a dedicated service out of Maputo to Jebel Ali Port where we enabling trade flow now through another corridor than, through some of the other corridors that previously were used.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that, become possible when you've got a strong logistics platform in Africa and you've got a global hub like Dubai that you can connect into using port infrastructure, marine services that DP World have, and really provide an end-to-end connectivity.
Yeah, I want to take the opportunity while I have you to talk about that Africa-wide picture in terms of connectivity as well as the ports. The other day I read on the internet, someone was talking about African ports that are growing and are exciting, and they mentioned, if I remember correctly, Cape Town was on that list, then there was Maputo on that list, then there was also the mention of Dar es Salaam. What I didn't see was Durban, and Durban, as we know, is the largest in terms of handling volumes. I want to talk about your plans on that front, and I also want to know what excites you when you look around those African ports, and where do you see opportunity for DP World?
Yeah, look, I think Durban is obviously, as you say, our largest container terminal, and it is a significant player in terms of the trade flow of product from South Africa into Africa. I believe, Durban has obviously got capacity constraints. Recently, we've seen, efficiency issues, time delays. There've been many problems through that port, as you're well aware. And other alternatives then become viable. Maputo certainly, even the Beira corridor becomes an interesting one because taking product through Beira, for example, into the hinterland of Africa is a lot shorter than Durban and is a lot cheaper. Maputo is closer to Johannesburg than Durban is. So from a supply chain efficiency and cost perspective, the other ports have added capacity and just in terms of their location become viable propositions. But then there's other things that affect port connectivity, and that is obviously shipping line services into those ports. So what we have seen is that even though Durban is very congested and inefficient, the shipping lines still like to come to Durban because there's a lot of exports that come out of Durban, and there's a trade balance there that makes the supply chain efficient. You may not get that in some of the other ports, even though their proximity to where they are could be more viable.
Yeah.
So there's many elements to this, and I do think that Durban will still play a big role in the supply chain and connectivity of Africa to the rest of the world. And we certainly would, as DP World, like to support that opportunity if it does become available.
Absolutely. But in the meantime, they've got to jack up their socks. There's no question about it because competition is hotting up. I wanted to turn the conversation and talk a little bit more about logistics across the African continent. We know, of course, this is a large landmass that we're talking about. But we also know that from history, this is a continent that was not connected because the people who were in charge before were concentrating more on taking stuff out of the continent rather than building infrastructure that took stuff from one part of the continent to the other. Then DP World comes in. How are you guys looking at that Africa picture and that Africa opportunity?
Yeah, we see Africa as a major opportunity from exports, imports, just the growth opportunities within Africa across many industries. One of the things we're very strong in Africa is consumer and healthcare distribution, where we play a very important part in getting consumer goods and healthcare products to millions of people across Africa, which actually takes the product right into the last mile. So we obviously see big opportunity in consumer demand across FMCG and healthcare. And with the network we have now in 26 countries, we will expand our business into those regions just from the growth that will provide, from the consumer. But we're also looking at expanding our footprint into other geographies on the African continent. And with the port capability that we have now with DP World and the connectivity that gives us, we can now really take product, as I say, from source market into Africa, and then actually take the product right into the last mile.
Sure.
And commodities and exports, agricultural products are in big demand globally, and there's a big role to be played there in the supply chain.
Yeah.
So I believe combining Imperial and DP World, you really create that gateway into Africa, and that was, as I said, a big strategic rationale for the deal.
Yeah.
And now we've got a great base, and we need to build on that and expand on that.
Yeah, and the DP World, of course, wouldn't have seen or foreseen the impact that was going to come in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which is creating a new dynamic in terms of Africa's trade relations with the rest of the world. So it couldn't have come at a better time. But at the same time, we also know that Africa suffers from many constraints. If I remember correctly, Mohammed, correct me if I'm wrong here, but here in South Africa, most of our goods are transported by road as opposed to other parts of the world where most of the goods are transported by rail. How much is that a constraint and how much is that an opportunity? And I don't know if you have got a picture for me in terms of how it's constructed across the rest of the African continent.
Yes. No, clearly, there should be more options than just road to move product, particularly commodities. In my mind, those type of products should not be on road. They should be on rail. So I do think road will always be a very important part of an economy in terms of supply chain. If you go into Europe, where they have got very well established rail networks, road is still a big component of the supply chain. I think in Africa, because of the fact that railway lines have to cross many countries to complete a supply chain, there's a lot of complexity in building rail infrastructure. And that's when you have to then use road infrastructure as an alternative. I think that with some of the investment, particularly in Southern Africa, happening around rail, that will create a lot more opportunity. And, we see that as positive for the logistics industry in Africa, that if we have a better rail infrastructure, we'll have more an intermodal type solution that we can offer our client rather than just moving product on road. But rail infrastructure is very capital intensive. As I said, it requires a rail infrastructure to be put over many countries, which is complex. So I do think it will come and it will happen in Africa, but it will take time. And the road will still be by far the majority of the mode of transport, in my view.
Yeah. And when you look at that picture, I don't know whether perhaps I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but we know the U.S. has called for a summit between African leaders and the U.S. I think it's going to be in December, and they are looking at more than 50 African heads of state that they hope will come. We know this is part of a wider conversation around the realignment in trade in the world as a result of that Russia-Ukraine war. Is that an opportunity for companies like Imperial?
Absolutely, because with these changes comes change in supply chains. And we've seen that through COVID when, there is big world events, particularly the one you mentioned, it requires supply chains to be shifted and changed. And that creates opportunity because how product flows is not like going forward is not the way that product will flow historically. And that means there's opportunity for us as a logistics company to come up with alternative supply chain solutions. And, that creates opportunity, that creates growth, and that makes us more relevant.
Yeah. What about this other noise that we have on the African continent in the name of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? I say noise because we know political leaders do their thing, but it's business that is going to come in and actually put in the capital that's required and move the goods and services that are required. Your view as DP World of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, how big is it? But practically, are you seeing this thing making a difference in terms of moving goods around the continent?
Yeah, I don't think that's a short-term initiative. It's gotten a lot of traction in recent times, and there's great intent with it. But I do think it will take a long time before we realize the benefits of that, because I do think there's a lot of benefit in creating free trade zones, etc. It just enables trade to happen better. And a big part of our business model is not just to put up port infrastructure, but also to put up economic free trade zones that can be used as hubs to get product, more freely into areas that it couldn't go into. So you'll see with a lot of the port development that DP World does, there's a lot of industrial parks, free trade zones that are added to that to allow for trade to flow more freely.
Yeah.
And the Africa Free Trade Zone talks to that. So that's why I believe there's a big opportunity in that for DP World,
Yeah.
because with the business model we have, we'll be able to take advantage of that in terms of setting up those free trade zones. And then obviously the logistics that flow from that is also part of it, which we can now offer.
Yeah.
So it talks to our strategy and our business model.
Has it made any difference yet? Have you seen anything improve?
No, I think, like I say, it's early days. But we've got now free trade zones in areas we didn't have. And we are seeing that, it does bring down the supply chain cost, and it does allow for trade to happen more freely. And yeah, I think it will just go from strength to strength. But as you say, with these things, it will take time and it's complex.
Yeah.
Because it does have other impacts on the economies that of the countries and the economies that this will be implemented in.
Yeah, I know you are on your way to Dubai after living all of your life in South Africa. I wanted to talk a little bit more, though, about the work that awaits you there. And I wanted to know if you have been in a position now where you have laid out the plans that DP World is going to play in terms of its Africa leg investment-wise. What sort of broad plans are we talking about here to increase capacity? So if you're able to share with me some numbers surrounding capacity increase, capital expenditure, etc., that would be very helpful for me.
Yeah, look, I'm not at liberty to disclose that kind of detail, but all I can say is that, but I can give you a sense of that. Imperial was a major investment for DP World. It was about a $1.5–2 billion transaction. DP World has recently invested in ports in Senegal. They continue investing in ports like Angola. Maputo, as I said, is a current port that the DP World operate, or terminal. And there's certainly a big appetite to expand the port network of DP World to other parts of Africa. And DP World certainly see Africa as one of the great growth opportunities. And connecting Africa with the UAE and India and the global port network that DP World have is a big opportunity, because there's no other player that has got the port network that DP World has. And we all know that the world needs Africa's commodities and its agricultural products and whatever we export. And we know Africa has got 1 billion people, and a young consumer that's going to require, whose consumption is just going to increase. And we certainly see a big appetite for multinationals wanting to access that consumer. So it is one of the biggest opportunities from a trade perspective, from a consumer perspective and a logistics perspective. So I think the intent of DP World to continuously invest in it has been certainly demonstrated in the last 12, 18 months, and that will continue. Yeah, it is a key part of our strategy, the growth of our business on the African continent.
I wanted to know your thoughts as you head to Dubai. What kind of a legacy you see yourself leaving here in South Africa?
Yeah, look, I think, we as Imperial, we now become part of a global organization. And the legacy that I'd like to leave behind is that the people of Imperial see that there's opportunity in that, they can advance their careers now as part of a global organization, but also that South African companies and the management teams we have in this country are very high quality, and we have great companies here that are attractive to global international companies. And I would encourage our people in the country not to think that we're not world class and we're not of a standard where we can become part of global organizations. So for me, that is a legacy of certainly what we've done, I believe, with Imperial. We've taken a South African company, grown it internationally, grown it in Africa, and taken it to a point where a big global company like DP World acquires us and makes us part of their strategy. And I hope that is an inspiration to the rest of our South African colleagues that we are world class, and we should not think that even though we are the southern tip of Africa, we're not at the leading edge of our game or our business.
And many hearty congratulations on that achievement, Mohammed. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this afternoon, and all the best as you head to the top of the African continent, geographically at least. That was Mohammed Akoojee. He is the Group CEO of Imperial and the Chief Operating Officer at DP World's Logistics pillar. You've been watching Captains of Industry. Thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.